Yeah, welcome to the show, and I'm looking forward to jumping deep in with you. So, yeah, let's start there. Let's dive into your backstory a little bit. How did you get to this point of really into being a spiritual teacher?
It's a great question. And, as you follow your soul's journey throughout life, usually if you're following the divine design for your life, you're going to end up in that position where you're like, I would have never thought I'd be here doing this, 10 years ago. And that's certainly been the case for me. So I grew up as a pastor's kid in evangelical Christianity and was very devout Christian and wanted to follow in my dad's footsteps and be a pastor one day. Got into fitness about 14 years old and just got addicted to the gym like a lot of guys do. And so at 23, I graduated from Oral Roberts University in Tulsa with a bachelor's degree in music and theology, because I was training to be a sort of a worship pastor, if you know what that is. The guy who does the music and leads the songs and all that. So that's how I started my ministry career. And I'd been battling with the existential questions about my religion since about 18. But if you grew up religious, you know exactly how this is. Being entrenched in Christianity, having absolutely zero friends who weren't Christians, every single member of my family are devout Christians. When you start to really question some of the beliefs in your faith, you start to get a little bit of nervousness internally because you know what the risks may be if this questioning continues. And so it took me till 23, so 5 years, before I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't deny the inner conflict I feel. It's inauthentic for me to get up on this stage and pretend like I serve the same God you guys serve. I don't believe in that version of God. I have to be true to myself. So I just kind of walked out of my life, and everything I expected would happen or feared would happen did happen. I lost every friend that I had. Everyone in my family, except for my parents and sister, also pretty much denounced me as a heretic, and to this day really don't communicate with me. And that's all just part of the soul's journey. And that's part of the leap of faith that the universe will ask us all to take multiple times in our life if we're truly ready to extend our soul to the next phase of our journey. So I did that first at 23, spent 4 or 5 years just deeply pursuing kind of enlightenment teachings, mostly through the Eastern religions of Hinduism and Buddhism, and started to go through my dark night of the soul around that age. I had gotten married at 23. And after I kind of left my religion, my wife and I did this in our relationship because she wasn't really ready as much as I was for that transition. So just understanding like this isn't going to work out long term, I decided to get a divorce at 26, moved back to California, moved in with my parents, and just started my life all over again. And so that's when I got my first, so I'd been personal training for about 4 years, but I got my first big personal training gig at Google in Mountain View as like a corporate personal trainer. So was living all by myself in a small, tiny apartment, live in the Bay Area life where you really don't have a life outside of work, and had to work a lot of hours to pay the rent, but just kind of was pursuing deeper answers about what do I believe about God, the universe, life, reality, who I am, and finding, good answers in those Hindu and Buddhist traditions, but was still just suffering a lot. And that led me to a pretty intense spiritual awakening experience at 27 or 28. I've told the story in so many podcasts, so I won't go into it unless you want me to, but basically I just had this epiphany or sudden insight that the ego mind I was identified with and suffering so much from was not real and not who I was. And so that left me in this very kind of Buddha state for 2 weeks. And then at the 2-week mark, I basically woke up on that morning and I looked at my phone and noticed it had been 2 weeks to the day that I was in that state of just absolute bliss and oneness with the universe. And I had this first ego thought come back online, which said, wow, I wonder if this is enlightenment. Maybe I'm enlightened now. And that was the first ego thought that I didn't catch. And as I allowed that thought room in my mind, it basically unraveled that state, and the ego came back with a vengeance. And I'm sure you know this, Sean, as as you go through a spiritual awakening, the ego doesn't like to be usurped from its throne like that. And so it usually comes back with a vengeance to get some revenge against you. And that's what mine did. So I went through many more years, probably 2 more years of really intense depression, but this time with a totally new attitude towards that depression, because now I had actually tasted what freedom is. And I had no ability to doubt that whatever you want to call that state, enlightenment, illumination, freedom, I had no ability to doubt that that state is real and available for the human being. And so that gave me this burning passion to do whatever it takes to return back to that state at any cost. And that journey of returning back is what eventually led me to start making YouTube videos. And never did I expect I was going to be any good at speaking or teaching for a living, but I was just so passionate about these topics and wanted to make videos out of my passion, and kind of discovered a gift that I didn't know I had. So here we are.
That's amazing. Aaron, I totally relate to your story as well. And, one thing that the way that I sort of experienced, what you were saying was, it's sort of like that door to enlightenment was closed. It was like it was locked. And then all of a sudden it sort of cracks open and we get this like taste, we get this, sniff of what it, could be. Mm-hmm. And then it's like the ego was like, oh, what's that? I can grab some of that too. Mm-hmm. And so it comes back and wants in there. But I found that so powerful. And this is what I want to ask you as well. When the ego comes in with like more force, like you said, with vengeance, I found that so profound because I could actually see when the ego was coming back and being more powerful, I could actually identify it. And so it gave me that clarity of like, there you are. Mm-hmm. All the ways that I couldn't see it before. It was sneaking sort of in the background. Is that experience as well?
Yeah, the clarity gained from a spiritual awakening is the biggest aid to sort of, I like to use the word back engineering that state. It depends on how long you actually were able to experience that state. For most people, it's, a few moments, maybe just a few seconds, some people minutes, some people hours, some people days. And in the rarest cases, such as Eckhart Tolle or Byron Katie, that shift from ego consciousness to universal consciousness happens in one foul swoop, and the ego never comes back online. Because when the depth of realization is strong enough, when you realize the truth of the universe is oneness, that there's only one being in the universe, one consciousness, one life, one power. If you realize that to such a degree, it's as if the working mind, there's like an off button that's pushed on the working mind, and it can leave somebody in a state of kind of disorientation for a while. And if you know Eckhart Tolle's story, when he had his awakening, he was left kind of sitting on a park bench for 2 years in silence, just contemplating the nature of reality, I guess, because it's such a completely different vision. It's the magnitude of it, the epicness of it is just too much for the working mind to take in. So it kind of just shuts itself off for a while. And I think in the background, the working mind is trying to figure out, okay, how do I engage with the world? No longer from a dualistic lens, but from a oneness lens. And it takes the mind a while to figure out how to do that, because the mind has only known duality. So you're very right when you say that if you've been able to experience sudden awakening and then watch the ego mind come back online and creep its way back in, take advantage of that opportunity if it ever happens to you, because you have a brief window of opportunity to really glimpse the inner workings of the ego, the way that it identifies with the body's actions, the thought, everything. And you get to watch it happen if you're paying attention, of course. And then that information, that understanding you gain, will be of great aid to you in now seeing that ego at work throughout your day and catching it in action and stepping away from it more and more. And it's that gradual practice of doing that, just noticing my ego and the way it's trying to pull me into identification and pride and selfishness, and making a conscious choice to not have your energy move inwards, which is what ego consciousness is, but to turn your energy outwards, which is universal consciousness. And that is what I like to summarize as the state of giving and receiving. So totally. In unity, giving and receiving is the law of the universe, right? Everything in the universe exists in relationship, and relationship is giving and receiving. And so if you want to be connected to the universe and abide in that state of oneness, you have to be in a state of giving and receiving. Receiving means accepting life as it is in the present moment, right? Are you receiving the universe as it is here and now? Or are you resisting it, trying to change it, trying to fight against it? Well, then if you're doing that, you're in taking and keeping, which is ego consciousness. What can I take from the universe and what can I withhold from others? That's what keeps our energy moving inwards, and the suffering continues. So for me, it's become more and more about my actions rather than just the things I learn and the concepts, and reading more books. That's all beneficial for sure. But there's something so powerful, Sean, about making a priority to live with right action, to live with humility and integrity and honesty and kindness and service to others. If you are doing that, if you're making a great effort to live like that, you are destroying your ego moment by moment, because ego does not want to be of service to others. It doesn't want to be humble. It doesn't want to be kind. So when you sort of like act as if, what does the enlightened person do? How do they live? Live like those beings. They're kind, they're humble, they're mindful, they're patient, they're present. If you can actually practice living that way, that to me was like the golden secret. I wish I would have known 5 years sooner and saved myself a lot of wasted time and effort.
Oh my gosh, totally. And you just unpacked so much there, Aaron. That's phenomenal. Thank you for sharing that. Again, that is the experience that I went through, and I know so many listening here as well are really curious about. And I love that part about the ego and really about doing right action. I have this saying, which is, it's not who's right, it's doing what's right. And so
I love that.
Instead of casting blame, it's like, okay, what's the right thing to do? And how do I, receive more love, more connection, more self-love?
Mm-hmm.
And so what you're saying, Aaron, this is just absolutely beautiful. Aaron, what part, if we were to just go back right before that moment where you had this spiritual awakening, would you say that there's anything that sort of led up to that happening? Meaning, was there a series of events that was like, whoa, I could feel something coming on? Maybe it was like great challenges or confusion, or, like you said, maybe it was the depression you were talking about, because all of those are very helpful with so many people that I believe are also, if they haven't, they're going to be facing those challenges as the opportunity to really up level or go to their next level of evolution.
Mm-hmm. Well, at the time that it happened, I definitely didn't see or feel any change coming. It was like getting hit by a bus of truth or something all at once. Yeah. It was really more like a curtain was pulled back and I was admitted into another realm or something like that. It was like the same thing I see every day, the same people, trees, clouds, world. It's all the same, but it's felt and sensed in an entirely new way. And so when I look back, yes, I can see what led up to that experience, which I would just summarize as a really strong desire to know the truth. So when I grew up as a Christian, I mentioned I was super devout. I loved God. I loved Jesus. I wanted to be like Jesus. I was very sincere in my faith.
Yeah.
So when I left the religious view of God behind and I kind of disavowed it, I went through like a closet atheist period where I thought, well, gosh, if that God's not real, then maybe there is no God. And maybe the atheists are right. And there's just nothing arising out of nowhere. And there's no meaning in any of it. And when I die, I'm gone. When my mom dies, she's gone. I never get to see my loved ones again. There's just eternal separation. And that thought terrified me because I'd never truly sat with that possibility in my entire life. It was always, God is real. I know I'm going to heaven when I die. Certainty, certainty, certainty. So that catalyzed the depression hugely. But what I did to move through that phase was I thought, okay, I want real answers. I don't want to just fool myself into another cult or something.
Totally.
I want to actually know if I'm understanding the truth correctly. So who knows the truth about the afterlife? Well, probably people who've died and experienced it, right? So I started like obsessively reading near-death experiences for at least a 6-month period. I would just, before work, I got to read 3 or 4 before I go to work. And then I get home and it's like 2 hours of reading a night. I mean, that's how obsessed I was with this. And over the course of those few months of reading probably thousands of NDEs, it was undeniable that 90% of them were essentially the same experience, all unique, but essentially the same archetypes were there, which is consciousness leaving the body after physical death, seeing the body from an elevated position, seeing the room around you, being able to hear all the thoughts of everybody in the room. Then the turning towards the light, going towards the light, meeting the light, which is felt as this eternal, unconditional love, an intuitive knowing that, oh, this is God, as we call it in our realm. It's like eternal, pure consciousness made of infinite love. And it has no judgments towards me for all the evil I've done. But then the next thing that happens is the life review, where they get to see their entire life in review from a higher perspective and feel all the pain they caused others and all the wrongdoings they did. And out of seeing the unloving actions one commits during their life, there's a burning desire in the soul, like, please let me go back and try again. Like, I'm going to get it right. I'm going to remember that love is the truth, and I'm going to be love in the world. And so people reincarnate again and again and again until that life review is seen. And it's like closing the chapter on a good book, like, perfect ending to the story. I finally realized love was true and I lived according to the laws of love. I don't feel any need to go back to that realm anymore. And then the soul continues on with its evolutionary journey from there. So we're kind of in this realm where we're all doing that. We're trying to learn the lessons of love, which, as you know, is the 4th density of consciousness, the 4th level of consciousness, the awareness of love and unity. So humanity is trying to make this transition right now out of 3rd density consciousness, which is separation from each other, into unity consciousness in the 4th. And so there's a lot of healing, right, that needs to be done, and a lot of purification from those egoic beliefs and behavior patterns. So, we go through that individually like I did, and we go through it collectively. So for me, Sean, it was just this sort of trained, habituated devotion to God that I'd had my whole life. I had this God-shaped hole in my heart, as cheesy as it sounds. And so because I wanted to know God so badly, and I was suffering so much, it was like the combination of those two things just led me to that experience where the universe kind of answered my plight and gave me a glimpse of reality for those 2 weeks. And then because I was so unintegrated, it put me back in my regular state and let me continue on with my evolution. But again, that was the gift, was that now I can no longer deny that liberation is available. And 2, nothing else is interesting to me anymore. So like, I was a full-time fitness model in San Francisco, quit my job immediately. I was a competitive bodybuilder at the national level, quit my bodybuilding show, and just devoted all my free time to spiritual seeking.
That's incredible. Of course, I so relate to the fitness journey, as that took a large part of my coming out of my divorce. And it was also a part for me to catapult that healing that you were talking about. But as I got into fitness modeling and trying to be all healthy and increase my mindset, that's where my ego really started to attach to, look look at the success you're having, getting into like fitness magazines and all
Mhm.
this. And that's actually what really catapulted my, what I call this great turnaround, or this divine flip, where it was like, boom, there was like a little crack in the door. And, you mentioned something called, healing, and that is actually a big part of the journey, or at least this initial stage of integrating. So, were there certain things that that you really found useful just in that healing aspect, or did you just recognize it was like, "Wow, I'm separating and I'm moving into a new realm and just sort of transitioning"?
So when I was going through the period of, trying to figure out how do I get back into that state of consciousness again, trying to remember what it was like. Interestingly enough, actually, by the way, I did figure out for about another 2-week period that if I smoked cannabis, it would put me right back in that state. So as soon as I had to painfully admit to myself that my ego was returning, I started to just get high all the time, and I was high 24/7. I didn't want to be sober because that sober to me meant ego consciousness, right? But even with cannabis, which is kind of a spiritual cognitive enhancer, it still wore off completely after those 2 weeks or so. And then I was just left with my own devices. And obviously grace guided my journey every step of the way. It's all God's doing ultimately. But the key turning point for me was when I started to ask the question of like, okay, what do I really suffer from? What are the emotions I really suffer from? And through contemplating that, I came to the conclusion that, yeah, there's really just 3 negative emotions. There's many different variations of each one, but there's just 3 root negative emotions, which are sadness, anger, and fear. And so lots of flavors of each one, right? But those are the basic root emotions. And we have root chakra, sacral chakra, solar plexus chakra. So those are the 3 emotions ego generates from the lower 3 chakras to pull us into identification and get us into our patterns and all that. So I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So if there's 3 different ways I can suffer by being sad, by being angry, or being afraid, or, stressed out, anxious, then there's got to be a reason why I suffer in those unique ways. Like there's got to be some kind of underlying belief behind sadness, behind anger, and behind fear. And so when that light bulb went on, the question was, okay, what are these beliefs? And to make a long story short, eventually it became clear that sadness is caused by the belief in lack.
Yes.
Simply enough, right? You're always sad because you believe you are lacking something. And even deeper than that, it's always love at the end of the day. You believe you're lacking love. So when you lose something that you associated with love, a family member, a fancy car, it doesn't matter. You'll feel sad and depressed because you feel you're lacking some kind of love. That's the first belief. I am incomplete. I am lacking. Then what's the belief under anger? Well, my mom used to say when I was a kid, anger is what happens when a goal gets blocked. So it became clear that the second belief of ego is basically attachments to external objects. So my happiness depends on outcomes, basically. If I am lacking, I need to go out into the world and gain things that will complete my lack. And so that's what you mentioned with your fitness modeling and being in magazines. It's ego thinks that, if I just get in that magazine, then I'll truly be happy. So it's an outcome on a pedestal that the ego's chasing and worshiping. And if anything gets in the way of that outcome, if anything blocks your outcome, what's the reaction? Anger, frustration. Somebody's to blame. Who's blocking me from my outcome? Maybe it's God and God's to blame. Maybe I'm an idiot and I screwed up, so I'm angry at myself. Or it could be some other person, right? But anger is the weapon ego uses to get its outcomes by any means necessary. So attachment to outcomes causes anger. And then the third belief of fear is basically the belief that you're in control. So anytime you think that you're losing control, fear is the response, right? A panic attack or an anxiety attack is what happens when somebody thinks they're losing control over something or they don't have control. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. You're not able to control something you thought was in your control previously. And so the remedy for that is to realize that God is in control of everything. So those were the three beliefs that the universe revealed to me as I kept asking these questions. And so then the practice became very simple, Sean, which was, all right, so all I need to really do is to pay attention to my emotional guidance system, because now I realize my emotions are not my enemies. They're not trying to hurt me or cause me to suffer. They are like messengers of truth, right? A negative emotion is not an attack. It's like a warning and a caution that, hey, you're thinking out of alignment with the universe right now. So if I see myself or believe something about myself that the universe does not think about me, I will feel a negative emotion, right? Because the emotional body is basically saying, incorrect perception of yourself, try again. And then likewise, a positive emotion of peace, love, happiness. We feel those things when we see ourselves correctly as the universe sees us. So when I feel empowered, when I feel abundant, when I feel radiant, I feel a positive emotion. And the universe is basically saying through my emotional guidance system, ding, 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 that's a correct way of feeling about yourself. So now that I know my emotions are not enemies and that I have no false feelings, that cut my suffering like in half right away. Because now my negative emotions are not something to be resisted, but to be welcomed in and listened to, right? And okay, what are you trying to communicate to me? And now I knew if it's sadness, it's trying to tell me that I'm believing I'm lacking something. And I need to correct that belief. If I'm angry, my emotions are saying, hey, you're attached to an outcome, buddy. And that's why you're suffering. So take that attachment off the pedestal. And then if I'm afraid, stressed out, worried, I'm believing I'm in control of something. And that's obviously not true, that I'm in control of life. I'm making the gears of life turn. No, I'm just in relationship to life, but life itself is in control and is doing everything. So to resist life for any reason always brings suffering upon yourself. So that's the spiritual practice of like surrender. Just surrender to this experience. Trust God, trust the universe, and watch how it unfolds in your favor. So that was the basic, the main path. And there was many things that helped me along the journey, but that was the main one that gave me the most amount of progress in the least amount of time, was the three beliefs.
I love that. And I love how you tied that into the chakra system, or what I refer to as our power centers,
Yep.
come from each one. I notice with me, it causes us to think and feel a certain way in relationship to what you're talking about, that 4D love, oneness, wholeness.
Mm-hmm.
And absolutely, this is so great, Aaron, because bang on, even with everyone listening and I know they're going through, because I receive all the questions. And so what you're speaking about, just gold, man. When you talk about opening the door and starting to come from, that oneness and this wholeness, obviously we're going to have to redefine what success is. If all of a sudden it's not attachment, and if it's embracing the emotions, how has that looked for you as far as redefining what you go after? Because now you're talking about being a channel where life's in control, God's in control, love, replace all those words. To me, they're very, interchangeable.
Yeah.
How have you redefined success and what it is that you now value?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, success to me now is certainly seen as more embodiment of love, more awareness of oneness that actually operates through my state of being, meaning the way that I monitor my own spiritual progress is how effortless is the response of love from me. because for a long period of time on our path, we have to really put a lot of self-effort forward to be loving, right? Because we have the ego slave driver in our mind, just cracking the whip all the time to go chase outcomes and get me the things I want and fulfill my desires. So we're used to living selfishly all the time. And that's the energy moving inward, which is the negative polarity of consciousness is self-centeredness. And the positive polarity of consciousness is selflessness or love. And so you really just have these two options, right? You can choose love or separation, service to others or power over others. We could say it that way. And so it's just a question of what do you want? Because ultimately the creator doesn't judge either polarity as better or worse. It's just like, here's the two choices, because we need two choices in the universe. There has to be polarity for there to be any experience. And so we couldn't know the path of light if there wasn't also a path of the shadow. So your state of being is your barometer for how positively or negatively polarized you are, meaning your felt sense of self, that's your state of being. And it's always telling you what frequency you're operating on based on how you're feeling. So when we talk about like negative or positive emotions, I want to make this clear first that we're not talking about bad or good emotions. There's no value judgment in polarity. It's just like chemistry or something. In chemistry, every quantum particle needs to have a charge before it can do work in the quantum realm. And so work is the term for being able to cause change in your environment or act upon your environment. So before you can interact with your environment as a quantum particle, you need to have a negative or a positive charge. So the law of one, the text that I teach a lot from, says that we're like that. As a unit of consciousness, you're kind of like a quantum particle that needs to choose which polarity you want. And again, neither choice is right or wrong, but there are very different consequences to both choices. And so to choose the positive polarity is to get my energy moving outwards, as we said a minute ago. And this can be a little bit tricky to describe, Sean, or for people to grasp, because it's like, is the universe really that simple? Come on. And the answer is yes and no, right? The universe is actually so simple that a child could understand it. Yes. But at the same time, it's so complex, no mind is great enough to comprehend it intellectually. So like both are true, but let's just look at the childlike framework for a second.
Absolutely.
The universe functions in a certain way, right? There's certain laws, unbreakable, eternal laws of the universe that we can either obey or violate. That's it.
Totally.
So the universe doesn't see violating its laws as evil and bad. It's just that that's not the way the universe is. So we're talking about separation, right? And fear and those kinds of negative polarities. If you want to violate the law of oneness, the law of balance, the law of karma, you're absolutely obliged to do that, but you chose to violate the law. And so you're going to be the debtor for that, meaning you have to repay that karmic imbalance that you created, because the universe is perfect balance. Everything operates in balance. And that balance is, as we said a minute ago, the giving and receiving. Everything in the universe, every planet, every star, every organism, everything lives and moves and has its being by giving and receiving. You could not exist without breathing the air from your environment. And then you also exhale that air and the trees breathe that in. We could go on and on, right? We don't need to belabor that point. You depend on your environment. You depend on everything around you. So the question is, are you in a loving relationship to everything or a self-centered relationship? That's positive versus negative. Once you wake up to that and go, oh, well, gosh, no wonder I've been suffering so much. I've been constantly violating the law of the universe, which is oneness. And so I'm creating and attracting all this karma to myself because the universe is perfect and balanced. It's like, to the same degree that you violate the law of oneness, the law will violate you in equal measure, because the karmic balance has to be perfect all the time. So no one is being punished by some omnipotent God who's judging and wrathful. It's that you're creating your reality. And yes, you can live as if you're separate. The universe allows you to do that, but you can't live as if you're separate without consequences, Why? Because it's not true. You are absolutely one and joined and in relationship to the whole universe around you. You could not exist in a separated state. Nothing could exist in a separated state. So you're defying the way things really are and then blaming it on God that you're suffering so much. So the soul has to get that at some point, that I really just have two choices here. I can choose love or I can choose separation.
And ultimately what I hear you saying, Aaron, is even in our separate state, that's creating a situation and experience through contrast that we can be like, oneness, separation. Perfect. I've got enough experience of the separation. I'm going for oneness.
You got it.
And yeah, everything you're saying, Aaron, honestly, wow. I love it. It's, when we talk about karma and trauma, it's a very, when we look at the world and the conversation going on with healing and trauma, would you say that karma and trauma are linked?
Yeah, they're certainly linked. Karma is, the Sanskrit term karma really means sort of like your doing, your actions. Karma is just balance in a sense. Karma is the force in the universe that is always restoring balance, meaning whatever you give out will eventually come back to you. And that's the tricky part of the spiritual path for most people. This is why most of us have to spend 100 lifetimes, human lifetimes, before we wake up to the truth of oneness, because there's usually, not always, but usually a time gap between when I put out negative energy. Even just a judgmental thought about somebody is still putting out negativity because you're believing you're separate from them. And the universe is taking notice of every single thing you do. It's everything goes on the eternal record sheet, right, of the universe. So you can't hide anything about your quality of consciousness. It's all being seen. And so every little negativity you sow out will eventually come back to you so that you can re-experience it and then make that choice you just talked about of, oh, do I really want this? But because of that time gap, most of us don't connect that, oh, this is actually a return movement of my own negativity, meaning I'm creating negative experiences for myself because I'm bitter and I'm judgmental and I'm closed off and cold-hearted and selfish. Well, I can only create experiences that reflect that state of being, if that's the state I'm in. So it becomes this game of how do I change my state of being from that taking and keeping to that giving and receiving. And karma is the motivating evolutionary force that causes us to suffer, that makes us want to have a change. And so where trauma and karma are linked is that many, depending on the intensity of our negativity, which maybe can even come from past lives that we haven't fully paid off those karmic debts yet either, but we will attract experiences to ourselves that really provoke those three negative core beliefs of the ego, that I'm lacking, that my happiness is outside of me, or that I'm in control of this universe and I got to bend it to my will. All trauma is just reinforcing one of those three beliefs in some way or some form. The experience of abuse, let's say, is reinforcing the belief that I'm lacking love because obviously my abuser didn't love me. They saw me as unlovable. And so that's why they abused me in that way. So I'm definitely lacking love because I was abused. And so that's reinforcing that belief, right? So your traumas will continue to attract that same experience to you in different ways. You'll keep having people and things and events happen that seem to reinforce that belief. And so that's going to push the soul to one of 2 points, either just suicide, let's end this horrible incarnation, get it over with, or transformation and enlightenment, which is now I'm ready to give up the false to have the truth. And again, it takes many lifetimes for people to get to that point. So when you begin to make this transition, you can see people who are still struggling in that ego consciousness, living like they're separate, creating hell for themselves and everybody around them. You can truly see those people not as evil, but as just deeply suffering and ignorant of the truth. And you can feel compassion for them and just a desire to extend love to those people. That's what we call forgiveness. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. They simply lack spiritual vision. They lack the truth. And so how could they behave any differently? So that's when our trauma, our pain becomes our purpose. And the things we've been traumatized by, the obstacles we have overcome, then becomes our purpose in life to help liberate others from those same traumas. So even trauma, which is seen as the worst thing ever, has, a celestial gem inside of it of divinity, which is that this will transform you and catalyze you into the highest spiritual version of yourself if you make use of it. If you make use of your traumas by healing them, forgiving them, accepting them, and using them as motivation to help others and serve others, then you can truly be free and be happy. And karma is that force in the universe that is making sure everybody has to continually experience the consequences of their actions, so that we always have that choice of, do I still want this? Is this the way I still want to live in relationship to the universe? And eventually that choice will be made at some point.
I love that. It's whether what I hear you saying, whether talking about karma and trauma, is it's very purposeful for us to increase our awareness. If we can truly be present with it, again, coming back to where is it the ego still has the grip to attach or to force or even fix through outside means, versus my transformation is in my acceptance of what's going on, so it can pull me more inside.
Yes, well said.
Therefore, more awareness can come to me and through me. So this is just incredible. While we're just sort of on this point, I know you have this program of 4D University, which I love the name, by the way. That's just a golden gem right there. So, why don't you tell us more about 4D University? I know in our conversations, just having knowledge isn't enough. We have to live it in practice. And so to me, that's, what you're pointing at too, is university this is the place where, we come to transform and really go to the next level.
Yeah, I like to say that the universe is a university for consciousness, and your life experiences is the professor that's trying to teach you more about who you are and what the universe really is and why we're all here. So 4D University was really my attempt to deliver that experience to people in a deeper way, based upon kind of my own journey of actualization. And this is a whole nother huge topic that we probably don't have time to get into, but the transformation from third density consciousness, which again is ego consciousness, I'm a separate self in a separate world, everyone's separate from me, moving from that state to unity consciousness, fourth density, there's a certain transformation that happens literally in the physical body, a kind of neurobiological upgrade that happens to different degrees of intensity for different people, but it's what we classically refer to as a Kundalini awakening. And the Kundalini awakening is the way that there's a built-in evolutionary mechanism basically in our nervous system that when enough, it's really the combination of two things. It's enough, spiritual devotion to God or the desire to become love. When that plus a certain level of preservation of sexual energy is combined, this kind of dormant power comes into activation at the base of the spine in the root chakra. And this energy begins working up its way up the spine and through the energy centers or the power centers, and kind of purifying all the little distortions of third density consciousness that are in your nervous system and upgrading the capacity of the nervous system for enlightenment, basically. And so again, that can happen to some people. It happens kind of all at once. with the famous lightning bolt event that, the lightning bolt shoots up your spine and you kind of experience cosmic consciousness. And then you come down after that experience and all hell breaks loose in your psyche, because Kundalini just triggers all the ego's defenses basically all at once. And then there's a very painful, difficult journey to heal and integrate that. Or it can even happen very gradually over time through yoga and meditation. So 40 University, in short, is my attempt to take people through this journey of, we spend 4 months building the foundation through, the first course is called Master Your Mind. So basic mindfulness. We teach the 3 beliefs and how to get a grip on what is the ego, why does it do what it does, where does it come from, and how do we ultimately transcend it, is the first masterclass. The second masterclass is called Meditation Mastery, which is a 2-month deep meditation program where I take people deeper into the practice of meditation, accessing different brainwave states, and building a foundation of inner stillness, which we really need once we start to provoke Kundalini energy to awaken. As I said, depending on the amount of karmic load in the body, it can be a very difficult, sometimes painful experience for people. And so I try to build a foundation of getting that healing journey started, getting some inner stillness built so that we have the capacity to facilitate that ascension path for Kundalini. And so really that is when Kundalini makes its way from the root to the crown chakra, that completes our journey into 4th density consciousness. And for all intents and purposes, we become a 4th density being, even though we're technically still living in a 3rd density body. So it's an online academy that takes the student through this kind of spiritual ascension path. And yesterday was our 1-year anniversary, actually. And it's just been the greatest fulfillment of my life to have a community of people who are so devoted to doing this work. And I just wake up every day kind of pinching myself that I get to do this for a living.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. That is so amazing. And that sounds phenomenal. Do you have a website and links through social media that we can also check you out?
Yeah, you can go to 4duniversity.com and you can read all about the different programs and how the academy works, or aaronabke.com or my Instagram. Anywhere I'm at, you'll find information about 4DU.
I'd love that. No, that's great. We'll have to have another conversation, because this is, what you're talking about as far as, driving that energy up. Yeah, that's a whole other way of living.
Mm-hmm.
And, what I call going from just chasing and racing, externally, to really going vertically, how to drive the energy deeper. So Aaron, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story, your genius, and wow, thank you so much.
Thank you, brother, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have an amazing day.